Namaste students. Let us learn a new concept in today's lecture session. We have already learned that risk becomes an inevitable element of every business activity. In fact, the chief characteristic feature of any business is risk itself. So here the term business risk refers to the possibility of inadequate profits, or sometimes it may be even losses, which happens on account of uncertainties or unexpected events. The businessman estimates or expects a certain returns on the capital invested by him. In case if these returns are not as per the expectations of the business person, or could it be like he does not get anything in return and has to face the loss circumstances, this is what we term as business risk. So here the business risk is associated with every business activity. Whatever business activity that you undertake, risk becomes an inevitable element of this activity. Also understand that business enterprises always face two different kinds of risks. One you call it as speculative risk and the other one is known as pure risk. So the business risk could be categorized into two kinds. One, speculative risk. Two, pure risk. Now what does speculative risk mean? It involves both the possibility of gain as well as possibility of loss. Meaning that if the expected profits are not up to our expectations, that would also mean the speculative risk. So generally the speculative risk arises due to the changes in the market conditions. That is, it may be due to fluctuations in terms of the demand and supply conditions in the market. Or could it be the price fluctuations, a sudden fall in the price levels, or might be even relate to the customers' change in the fashion and taste. So all these could amount for the speculative risk. On the other hand, pure risk involves only the possibility of loss or no loss, meaning that in case if pure losses happen, it would result in a loss situation. If this pure loss does not affect the business, there would be no loss. So that is how we understand pure risk. Pure risk is generally caused by the chances of fire accidents, or could it be theft and burglary, sometimes even the labor union strikes. These are all like the chief causes for the pure risk. So here, when pure risk affects the business, it would certainly lead to the loss. That is, the absence of pure risk would mean no loss. The presence of pure risk meaning loss. So speculative risk involves both the possibility of gain as well as the possibility of loss situation. Speculative risk arises due to changes in the market conditions, or it could be changes in the price levels, or maybe changes in the taste and fashions of the consumers. Pure risk refers to the possibility of loss to your business without there being a possibility of gain. So pure risk always involves only the possibility of loss or no loss situation. And how does this pure risk occur? It arises due to fire, theft, strike, burglary, and so on. Let us also study the nature of this business risk. Business risk arises due to uncertainties. If we knew that there could be a loss in the future situation, we would not call it as a risk at all. It is unpredictable. We will not be able to estimate or predict what is going to happen in future. So therefore, business risk arises due to uncertainties. Also, it is understood that risk is an essential part of every business activity. If the business does not face this kind of risky situation, every other person, you and me, would have become a business person. If there could be an assured level of returns for the capital invested, which person would not be interested to do any business, you tell me? So naturally, risk is considered as an essential inevitable part of every business activity. But then degree of risk, the volume of risk, intensity of risk depends mainly upon the nature and size of the business. Usually there are certain business activities which is always coupled by a high risk situation. Imagine a satellite, an artificial satellite being sent. There is always a risk that it would not reach the destination. So here the risk is at a very, very high level. And larger is the volume of the business activity, more will be the risk faced by the business person. So the degree of risk mainly depends upon the nature of the business, what type of business are you going to do, and also it depends upon the size of the business activity. Then we also understand that profit is the reward for taking up the risk in the business activities. At times even the businessman would do risk return analysis. Because larger is the risk, automatically larger will be the returns. If the businessman is able to take a high amount of risk in his business, naturally the returns in the form of profits would be very high for him. So here profit is considered as the reward for taking up the risk in the business activity. Now, could it be speculative risk or pure risk? Let us analyze what are the chief causes of business risk. The principal cause would be the natural causes, and mainly these natural causes would result in the pure risk situation. Human beings have a very little control over the natural calamities. For instance, it could be floods, famines, earthquakes, lightning, and heavy rains. All these we do not have a big control upon. The natural causes we call them as. So here, when these natural causes affect the business units, this would result in a very heavy loss situation, and even it would result in the loss of life, property, and coupled by income loss also to the business person. So the chief cause for the business risk is understood to be the natural causes. Then could it be man-made causes, human causes also? Human causes include such unexpected events, that is dishonesty by the employee, or could it be carelessness of the employee, negligence of the employees, or sometimes even stoppage of work due to power failure, or some kinds of strikes called for by the labor unions, riots, management inefficiency, that is wrong decisions, wrong timing decisions taken by the managers. These also could cause the risks in the business. So these could be understood as human causes or man-made causes. There could be another categorization on economic causes. So these economic causes which include uncertainties related to the market conditions. It might be in respect to the demand for goods. The business person expects a large demand for the goods to be sold by him. But unfortunately, that the demand for the goods has fallen down. And similarly, there could be an undue competitor or a rival who has already introduced a similar product with a higher beneficiary to the customers in the market. So this would lead to the competition and rivalry which has caused a risk or caused a loss situation to the existing business person. Similarly, the uncertainties related to the prices of the commodities, or sometimes even these uncertainties would relate to the debtor collection. That is, you have sold goods on credit, causing this to be a debtorship. And if that person who has to pay you the money back has not paid the money, the dues on time, this also would result in a high risk situation to the business. And similarly, obsolescence. This is understood to be a change of technology. Even though your present machinery or your present commodity being sold is in a very good condition, workable condition, but then if the technology all of a sudden changes, that this becomes outdated. The product that you need to sell or the machine that you are using suddenly becomes outdated and it would be put out of use. Take for instance mobiles. Now you have this 3G, 2G connection. A 4G connection alone is going to be compatible on the working of the mobile phones. Though your 2G mobile is in a workable condition, the network it would not serve. So the mobiles which have the 2G connectivity has to be thrown out because the basic all purpose is not served by this mobile phone. So similarly, the technological advancement also would lead to the economic causes. At times, financial problems also, like interest rates. All of a sudden, that RBI has increased the interest rates on the borrowings, and suddenly the tax system has changed and a very high tax has been levied upon when this GST was introduced. That many of the firms were affected because all of a sudden this increased the tax rate on a certain commodity, select varieties of the commodities. This would also lead to the economic risks. So all these types of risks would have a higher unexpected cost of operations. That is, that would result in a higher cost for the business person. Naturally, it would result in the risky situation to the business unit. Well, apart from the above causes, that is natural causes, man-made causes and economic causes, there could be certain other causes also, like for instance, political disturbances. Take for instance an unrest with the Chinese borders. Now suddenly this is augmented to shun the goods made in China. Earlier we never knew also whether it was made in India or China or any other countries of the world. Now people have become aware that this particular product that I'm not going to buy, because this is as a result of the political disturbances that is seen in the recent days. So these could also be one of the causes. So mechanical failures, that is suddenly, like bursting of the boilers or some kind of accidental issues that would relate in a massive business risk being caused in the business enterprise. Similarly, these are certain other causes which would lead to the possibility of the business risk. Now, the last concept for our study from this chapter would be like, what are the basic factors that any entrepreneur, a person who has to start the business entity, is supposed to be called as an entrepreneur. So what are the basic factors that needs to be kept in mind by any entrepreneur for beginning a new business enterprise? So let us analyze as to supposing that you yourself want to start any business unit newly, then what are the basic things that you would like to keep in mind or analyze before getting into this startership? The first and foremost is the selection of the line of business. It is very important that the nature of the business has to be decided upon. Idea. That is, you need to really think about the viability of this idea as to what exactly do you want to purposefully do. It is selection of the line of the business, meaning here that you need to also select the nature of the business and the kind of the ownership also. That is, whether you want to start alone in the form of sole proprietorship, do you want to have a few people along with you as sharing the ownership in the form of partnership, or would you like to get it registered under Indian Companies Act in the form of a joint stock company? So here, important is the type of the business activity, that is the ownership, management and control formations. Apart from that, the nature of the business is essential to be selected upon. That is what exactly the business activity that you need to do. Because the objectives of the business is essential to give it a shape and form. Like in order to have a full-fledged business unit, it is important that the entrepreneur must decide upon the line of activity of the business. Then comes into the picture the size of the firm. Do you want to start it at a smaller scale, a medium scale, or a large scale business activity? Now, when you are talking about the size of the firm, students, you also understand that the size of the firm indirectly is related to the ownership aspect. Can I even think of starting a very big pharmaceutical industry or a huge, plant, iron and steel or cement manufacture in the form of sole proprietorship? It is very difficult because it requires huge capital, very huge capital, and the risk involved is also very high. So naturally, the large scale firms would be preferably be started in the form of a joint stock company. On the other hand, if I'm starting for say some handmade products like safety pins, or it could be agarbatti making or a camphor making small unit, this I could think of either starting it in the form of sole proprietorship or even the partnership. So the size of the firm is a basic determinant of even the ownership. Which form of business organization do you need to start about? Location of the business enterprise is a very important aspect for our discussion. So when I say location, it is essential that you need to find a proper location for your basic industrial unit. So when I talk about this location, it is understood that your plant or your place of manufacture production unit must either be placed close by to the raw material resource, or it could be placed nearby to the market conditions. Why am I specifically mentioning this point is, see, in case if you are unable to locate it either ways, that is closer to the raw material supply or closer to the market, you will be spending unnecessary expenditure upon movement of the materials, both in the case of raw materials as well as of your finished products. Both carriage inwards and carriage outwards, both would add up to the cost of the manufacture. So that is the reason why location of the business enterprise has to be well thought by the business person. Then financing the proposition. What do you mean by financing here? How does your money, your capital investment comes? There could be two sources as we understand. One, it could be our own source, that is the proprietor's fund we call it as, where the equity is being given or the capital is being contributed by the proprietor himself. This forms a capital portion. And in case if this is insufficient or the leverage of using a borrowed fund is being thought about by the owner or owners of the business unit, then naturally the external liabilities is being incurred. So it is important that the business person has to decide upon how does he collect the capital or the investment part. Is it going to be the owner's funds, or could it be a combination of owners as well as the borrowed funds? Now here comes another very important point to be thought about by every entrepreneur, is about the availability of the physical facilities. Physical facilities include all such infrastructural facilities that is required for the smooth running of the business unit. Could it be transportation facility, or it could be banking facilities, insurance, or warehousing facilities. So the availability of the physical facilities is a very important point to be thought about by the business person before he locates his business unit. So it is essential that he has to check for the availability of these basic infrastructural facilities. Now many times, there would be like a kind of clash about this particular point. See, if you go to remote rural areas, what happens? The land would be available at a cheaper cost, but at the same time, the basic facilities would not be available. When you want to locate your unit near urban areas, you find all this transportation, insurance, storage and such other facilities to be abundantly available, but at the same time, the cost of setting up your plant also would be basically high. So via media approach, it is like semi-urban, rural as well as urban, semi-urban or semi-rural areas are to be thought about by the entrepreneur. When it comes to plant layout refers to the structure of the industry or structure of the plant. It, refers to the building structure. So how exactly do you want to build up your structure? It depends upon again the nature of the business unit. So what kind of business that you are dealing all about? Imagine a sugar manufacturer would require a very large area wherein it requires open place, even storage facilities for your sugarcane storages, big boilers to be installed, etc. So plant layout is totally determinant upon the nature of the business unit. When you are procuring the physical facilities as well as plant layout go hand in hand. So when you are opting for a land, you must also think whether your plant could be set up properly in that particular land that you have acquired. Is the land area sufficient for the plant layout to be built in an economical and technological manner? So this is how the plant layout is understood. Then also it is very important that you need to have a competent and committed workforce. So when I say workforce, Could it be skilled or unskilled, and sometimes even semi-skilled laborers? So here many times when you are not going for automation and mechanization totally, it so happens that your industry would largely depend upon the workforce. So in case if your industry or if your manufacturing unit is situated in a more populous area, and sometimes even certain areas are very well, replenished with the availability of skilled or semi-skilled laborers. If you take textile industry, why is it more textile industry is seen in the regions of Mumbai? That is because skilled laborers for the textile industry is more seen in this particular part. So that is why the location of the business enterprise also is based upon the availability of the skilled and semi-skilled workforce. Now the entrepreneur has to go one step further, also has to do some planning for the taxation purpose. Profit is the motive of every business person, and when he gets this profit, it is essential that he has to look into the basic planning for the tax purposes, and then right and appropriate time for launching the business enterprise is very essential. Launching meaning to start with. So he has to see with the time and with the conditions of the market, when would it be essential or the right time for starting up the business enterprise. So all these are the basic factors that every entrepreneur has to think about before he begins with the business enterprise. So I hope the discussion on these two topics, that is in respect to the business risks as well as what are the basic factors that needs to be thought about by any entrepreneur while he is starting a new business enterprise. I hope this information is more purposeful to all of you. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.